committee will come to order. Senator Murkowski and I want to welcome our witnesses. And this morning, the committee is going to hear testimony on the results of last November's vote on Puerto Rico's political status and on the president's response. Puerto Rico has been a, quote, unincorporated territory of the United States since the conclusion of the Spanish-American War 115 years ago. After 115 years, it is clearly time for Puerto Rico to determine what political path it will take. The full written statements of all our witnesses will be entered into the record. I'm going to ask each of you to summarize your oral remarks to not more than 5 minutes. But let us first have the opportunity for Senator Murkowski to make her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and to our distinguished panelists, welcome to the committee. Mr. Chairman, as you noted, this hearing is a direct result of the November 2012 plebiscite that was held in Puerto Rico on their political status. It's an issue that I have taken an interest in and perhaps feel a sense of kinship, as I believe I'm the only sitting United States senator who was actually born in a territory. So that dates me a little bit, but I'm okay with birthdays. It's better than the alternative. It's long been my position that the process for determining Puerto Rico's preferred political status should come from Puerto Rico and not from Washington, D.C., just as the residents of Alaska and Hawaii did as the last two states that were admitted to the Union. Now that the plebiscite has been held, it's clear to me that a majority of Puerto Ricans do not favor the current territorial status as evidenced by the first question on the ballot. The result of the second question, however, is not as clear to me, nor is it certain that any of the valid status options would receive a majority vote. And when I use the term valid status options, I'm referring to the continuation of the current Commonwealth status, statehood, independence, and free association, similar to what the United States has with the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, and Palau. But what we learned is that the current status does not have majority support. Beyond that, I don't believe that we can draw any definitive conclusions about the plebiscite results. The President's FY14 budget request included $2.5 million for another plebiscite in Puerto Rico. But even if a new plebiscite is held, it is the Puerto Rican legislature that will determine how that ballot will appear. And if that path is chosen, I would encourage a format that is fair to all valid options. I look forward to hearing from the representatives that we have here this morning. Again, a very distinguished panel on a very important issue to the people of Puerto Rico.
Commissioner, and let's now go to Senator Berríos. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, in 1990, the late Senator Patrick Moynihan introduced in the Congressional Record an article of mine published in the Washington Post. The article warned that under territorial status, Puerto Rico would inevitably become either a Commonwealth ghetto or a ghetto state. We're almost there. Puerto Rico is rapidly becoming a Commonwealth ghetto, whereas under statehood, Puerto Rico will become a ghetto state. Last November, 78% of eligible voters participated in a plebiscite in political status in Puerto Rico. Two questions were posed. The first asked voters whether or not they supported the present territorial status. 54% voted no, a solid and undisputable majority. The second question asked whether they preferred independence, statehood, or sovereign free associated state. The result of the second question was neither clear nor irrefutable. Statehood obtained 45% of ballots cast, and 25% in reference to the second question were cast blank. Subsequently, President Obama proposed a $2.5 million appropriation bill for a new status, which could include the already rejected territorial status. Under the guise of inclusiveness, the President of the United States has proposed political subordination as an alternative future status, the same as Senator Murkowski. This is as absurd as offering involuntary servitude or jobs below the minimum wage as remedies for unemployment. International law demands respect for the right of self-determination, and Congress is empowered by the Constitution to dispose of the territory. But international law and constitutional law notwithstanding, Congress will not approve a plebiscite that includes a statehood option, for that would be tantamount to an indirect statehood offer. A statehood option is the death mark of any federally approved plebiscite, simply because Puerto Rican statehood is contrary to U.S. national interest. Before last year's plebiscite, the U.S. consistently argued that Puerto Rico had consented to colonial rule. Since then, maintaining territorial rule, always undemocratic, has mutated into despotism. But the U.S. will only act to decolonize Puerto Rico when it has no other alternative. It is therefore up to us Puerto Ricans to create the political crisis that will compel you to act. If the statehood forces win the next election, they will most probably legislate a statehood yes or no referendum. In another scenario, the present Commonwealth government could convene a constitutional convention to negotiate a non-territorial alternative to the present status. Inevitably, in any case, Congress will soon have to face its responsibility and make real self-determination possible. Such self-determination demands an informed choice between our inalienable right to independence as a distinct and separate nationality and the terms and conditions of any other non-territorial alternative which the U.S. is willing to consider. As to those terms and conditions, you should recall the words of the late Patrick Moynihan on the Senate floor in May 1990. I quote, "In the end, the great issues here presented are civic, not economic. Do Puerto Ricans want to become Americans? Because that is what statehood inevitably means. Or do they wish to preserve a separate identity?" I end quote. Moreover, you must ask yourselves whether you wish the U.S. to continue as a unitary federal state, a pluribus unum, or rather become a multinational state ruled by the motto, a pluribus duo. To conclude, I bring to attention the case of Oscar López Rivera, a Puerto Rican political prisoner who has languished in U.S. prisons for more than 32 years. 32 years, longer than Nelson Mandela. Puerto Ricans of all political persuasions have demanded his liberation, including the three-party presidents present here today. Surely, a nation that prides itself as a champion of human rights should take the executive decision to liberate Oscar López Rivera. Justice and a sense of decency demanded. I hope the non-presence of President Obama here doesn't mean that he cares so little about Puerto Rico that he's not even willing to consider making an appearance here through one of his representatives or liberate Oscar López Rivera. The three of us demand such liberation.
Thank you all for eloquent presentations. Let me just ask a few questions. I'm going to, in effect, ask them to the panel, and then I know my colleagues are anxious to ask questions as well. In November, a majority of voters opposed continuation of the current territory status. Looking forward to the plebiscite proposed by the President, do you, and we can just go down the row, believe that the Election Commission should agree that the current territory status should not be on the ballot? All right. Would you like to amplify on that? I want to be serious. I want to be respectful. Would you like to amplify on your no answer?
No, we already said no, and to ask us again would be as absurd as asking them to accept involuntary servitude already rejected by the Puerto Rican people. It's absurd.
All right. Let me see if I can get one other question in with respect to translating this issue of free association. One of the choices on the November ballot was sovereign free association. In English, this phrase would be taken to mean the current free association relationship between the U.S. and the three nations of the former U.S.-administered trust territory of the Pacific. However, some are concerned that when this phrase is expressed in Spanish, voters may confuse it with the Spanish phrase for the current Commonwealth or the proposed enhanced Commonwealth. So my question here is for each of you gentlemen. Do you think that this concern about confusion through translation is a valid one?
That phrase was invented by Puerto Rican colonialists in 1952. They call it Commonwealth here, so it will pass as a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or Massachusetts, and they call it Free Associated State there in order to confuse the people thinking it was some sort of a sovereign association. But now, 60 years later, obviously nobody's going to be confused by that.
So people are not going to be confused,
of course not,
in your view. Very good.
Nobody knows what enhanced Commonwealth means. They've been trying to define it for half a century. Nobody knows. So the answer is nobody knows. This is just juridical hocus pocus, juridical bull, to put it in plain English. So you shouldn't stress the point anymore because they won't define it. In definition is their name for the territory. And the territory has been repudiated by 54% of the Puerto Rican people. Now it has transmuted itself into tyranny. So it seems to me here, since you want information to take positive steps ahead, we're in the middle of a discussion similar to those held in the Middle Ages where people ask how many angels fit into a needle's head. You won't approve anything that says even indirectly you will accept statehood. So as long as statehood is in his bill or your bill, nothing will happen. And as long as Commonwealth remains, we remain a colony, a territory. It's about time you start speaking frankly to the Puerto Rican people, telling them what are the conditions under which you would accept, if you could accept statehood, refuse to consider colonialism any longer, and make a reasonable offer between our inalienable right to govern ourselves, either under independence or on any other formula of a non-territorial nature. If it's statehood, state the conditions for statehood. If it's free association, state the conditions for free association. That's the way to go. If not, we're losing our time once more in this Senate, the Senate's time and our time.
Should the ballot question under the President's proposal be simplified to statehood, yes or no, or sovereignty, yes or no? The question.
Excuse me. Statehood first. A statehood, yes or no referendum stemming from this Congress is an impossible proposition. You will never get passed through even this committee. I can assure you that. Through 30 years of experience, the United States will never make such an offer. So that's out of the question. Now, regarding the second question, we have an inalienable right to independence under international law. If you are willing to make a statement publicly and push through a status referendum where you offer independence with a reasonable transition, as it should be for your benefit and for our benefit, of course I would accept independence, yes or no referendum.
Let's do this. I'm going to let my colleagues ask any additional questions and then give my assessment of where we are at this point. Senator Murkowski, the current Senator Murkowski.
Let me ask you a question, Senator Berríos, because you brought up the issue of self-determination, yes, the right of all peoples to self-determination. But then in response to another colleague here, you indicated that, look, we here in Congress should just set out these conditions. You've said territorial status is out, it should be dropped, that the option for statehood is unrealistic. But if we were to basically provide these conditions to you, isn't that just another form of Washington, D.C. dictating to Puerto Rico whether it's the level of status or the conditions? How does that address this right of self-determination that you've spoken of?
Senator Murkowski, when you came into Puerto Rico in 1898, you asked nobody. You just invaded. I don't mean you. You were a territory.
Thank you.
The United States invaded Puerto Rico and consulted nobody. under the law, international law, you should devolve our powers so we can exercise our free determination. That is not going to happen, of course. You will only do that when you have no other option. We accept that statehood be put in a plebiscite in the future after the United States, if it's through a congressional, if the United States is willing to spell out the conditions for statehood.
And you don't think that that's then dictating in violation of your
No, because
right to self-determination?
Because the only right you have as a nation, not as Alaskans, nor as Hawaiians, nor as Texans, as a nation, the only right is the right to independence juridically. We know we are not the majority in Puerto Rico. What we say is that if a referendum is going to be held through an act of Congress, independence has to be included with a transitional period which should be included in independence. And if any other option is going to be included through an act of Congress, reassociation or statehood, then you should spell out whether you are willing to grant that once it is approved. Because once independence wins a referendum, there's no option. You have to act upon a petition for independence. We're in the 21st century, not in 1898. That's what I mean. Permit me for a moment.
Senator.
There's one condition for statehood, which the Resident Commission hasn't mentioned. It's Senator Moynihan's questions. Do Puerto Ricans know they have to become Americans in order to become a state of the Union? Or do they want their own separate identity? That's beyond economic transition. It deals with the way of being, the nature of being Puerto Rican. That's called a nationality under international law. We are a distinct nationality. Do we want to continue as a distinct nationality? Congress should be clear. Like Senator Moynihan, who was an expert on these matters. If you want to become a state of the Union, you have to become Americans. You cannot maintain your separate identity in the long run. That's a condition also which should be spelled out.
Mm-hmm.
Senator Heinrich.
Senator Berríos, following up on that idea, what would you think of a ballot that first asks up front, should Puerto Rico be part of the United States? Yes or no?
Well,
and if the answer is yes, then you choose on the second tier between statehood and the current status, Commonwealth status.
Of course not, because you cannot exclude independence in any
valid
plebiscite.
If they say no,
but you can.
Then you go and you choose between independence and free association.
Being part of the United States or not doesn't include independence. Independence means independence.
Right. No, I recognize that. I agree with you. But if the people of Puerto Rico vote no, we should not be part of the United States, then then you.
That's not being part of the United States. It's independence. It's a positive alternative, like the United States. You are independent. You have a right as a nation to be independent. We are a colony of the United States. What you can ask us is whether we want to become independent or not. That you can ask. Not whether we want to be part of the United States. Of course, we don't want to be part of the United States as a colony. The stateholders don't want it. Neither do we want it. The question is whether the world respects Estadistas or Commonwealthers. Of course, and I'm very glad that after 60 years of persecution of the independence forces, now we have the right to speak. This is all. We'll blabber on. Nothing is going to happen here. Nothing is. You will not act. I repeat, don't fool yourself. You will not act as long as statehood is a possibility offered. You will not act. But you have to act to decolonize. Think about it. How do you do it? How do you decolonize without including statehood as one of the alternatives? Senator Pierluisi's resident commissioner's bill will go nowhere. These readings, we're grateful, but they'll go nowhere either.
Governor.
Senator Murkowski's going to have the last word.
Well, I don't mean to have the last word, sure. But I wanted to share with you a thought that I just shared with the chairman here in reflecting on Alaska's statehood fight. It was a 90-plus year fight, and I'm reminded that it took us 90 years to get to statehood, And for us, the only decision was up or down on statehood. And the fact that Puerto Rico has been engaged in this issue for also many, many decades, but the fact that you have as many options as you do makes it perhaps even more difficult than Alaska faced when it was just an up or down. And as I would agree with the chairman that the process for determining what the options will be on the ballot and how they are defined is as critical as anything that we have discussed here today. So it's a challenge to you and those that you represent to try to address how we define what the options are and then how they would therefore be defined on this ballot moving forward. So I thank the chairman and certainly thank you, gentlemen, for leading the discussion here this morning.
Gentlemen, thank you. As you can see, the senators here, both political parties, want to work closely with you and get this resolved. And with that, the Energy Committee is adjourned.
Mr. Chairman, may I just make, I've been 50